Free-ranging marshes. No, we're not talking about chickens. We're talking about wetlands. Specifically, we're talking about coastal wetland migration. If coastal wetlands can't keep up with the challenge of rising sea levels and sinking lands by getting taller, another option is to let them roam and allow them to migrate inland, away from water. Marsh migration is a natural process by which an area of land is allowed to slowly convert to a marsh as sea levels rise. Barriers such as roads, berms, and bulkheads can prevent this from happening though. So it's important that we make good decisions now so that wetlands can persist into the future. Through a computer mapping project in 2017, DANREC identified 26,000 acres of land that are highly suitable for marsh migration. Some towns like Slaughter Beach are already planning for this. By allowing wetlands to persist and not drown out, they're protecting important features like houses, roads, and water treatment facilities that we all depend on.
First park rangers in America weren't rangers at all. They were soldiers, Buffalo Soldiers, African Americans who served in the Army after the Civil War. They got their famous nickname from Cheyenne warriors who likened their dark curly hair to that of buffalo hides. The nickname stuck, eventually becoming a name for all black soldiers of the time. From 1899 to 1904, Buffalo Soldiers of the 24th Infantry and 9th Cavalry, many of them veterans of the Spanish-American War, were tasked to protect Yosemite and Sequoia National Parks. That was more than 10 years before the birth of the National Park Service. That made the Buffalo Soldiers some of the first wilderness rangers in the world. And as such, they protected wildlife from poaching, put out wildfires, built trails, roads, buildings, and bridges, and kept the peace at Yosemite, Sequoia, and Yellowstone. Their legacy can be found in the Park Service's iconic flat hat, proudly worn by Rangers today, which echoes the hats then worn by American cavalry and infantry units. Serving in a time of racial animosity in America, the Buffalo Soldiers were pioneers of the Civil Rights Movement. With their service in times of war and times of peace, they were also fighting for their rights to be treated as full citizens of the nation they served. Honor their strength and their struggles on July 28th, Buffalo Soldiers Day.
If you're traveling with an expired license or misplaced your ID, or maybe you recently changed your name, here's what you should know before you fly. At the security checkpoint, the TSA officer will ask for your boarding pass and ID. If you're traveling without proper ID, our officers will ask you for 2 forms of alternative IDs, one of which must have your name and identifying information such as a photo, address, phone number, social security number, and/or date of birth. Some acceptable alternative IDs include student ID, credit card, birth certificate, social security card, utility bill, and/or insurance card. If you don't have any acceptable forms of alternative ID, you will go through the ID verification process. During the identity verification process, a TSA officer may ask you to complete a form with your personal information and will ask you additional questions to confirm your identity. Once your identity has been confirmed, you'll be able to proceed through security screening. You will likely undergo additional screening, which will include a pat-down. For your comfort and discretion, know that during the screening process, you may request to speak with a supervisor or request private screening. Have additional questions about screening policies, procedures, and what to expect at a checkpoint? Contact the TSA Contact Center before your next flight, or send a tweet or a direct message on Facebook to Ask TSA. For more information on travel, visit tsa.gov.
My name's Tom Loveland. I'm a researcher with the U.S. Geological Survey's Aero Center, and I'm involved in land use and land cover change research. My work over the years have been involved in trying to use remote sensing to map and monitor land cover and land cover change, and I've been doing that primarily over large areas, states to nations to the globe. Land cover maps are a fundamental geospatial input for a wide range of environmental, economic, and other types of investigations on the impacts between human activity and the environment. It's also important to have a fundamental knowledge of what the land is made of and how it's changing and why it's changing. And so my work has contributed to a number of those areas. I think it's important to realize that the USGS put a lot of preparation into the applications of Landsat data prior to the launch of the first satellite, and around that time started investing in the capabilities to use remotely sensed data, and especially Landsat, for studying and mapping land cover. And over the years, we have continually changed and innovated our approach to it, increased the frequency of products, improved their accuracy, and expanded the applications. And so the USGS plays a pretty critical role in meeting the national need for land cover. And it's all because of the ability to use the Landsat record so effectively. When Landsat was conceived, its mission objective was to understand the condition of the planet and to be able to distinguish between natural and human change. And so mapping land cover was a natural core part of Landsat's mission, and over the years it's contributed to that. By having that synoptic view of the planet, we're able to document change rates from place to place, from Landsat pixel to pixel. And when we do that over large areas, we see that some areas of our world are changing constantly and others are relatively stable. And so simply being able to identify those regions is something that Landsat's uniquely qualified to do. The Landsat science team represents a window on the Landsat user community, and as such they provide a great deal of insight and intelligence on how Landsat data are used, what the limitations are, and the changes that may come about. For instance, they provided a lot of the early advocacy in making Landsat data available to users worldwide at no cost. They argued in favor of something called the Landsat Global Archive Consolidation Initiative, in which we have essentially, at the USGS, been rescuing historical Landsat data scattered around the world at current and former ground stations. All changes are local. When we're looking at land use or land cover, it's the accumulation of a number of local decisions that end up having impacts both locally, regionally, and ultimately at the global level. And because Landsat is so synoptic, we have the ability to start looking at both the causes and the consequences of land change from that local to global scale.
U.S. Department of Energy Office of Legacy Management.
What I like most about working for LM is that it's a clear and righteous mission. The Office of Legacy Management and the U.S. Department of Energy looks after the protection of human health and the environment on close to 100 sites around the nation. Sites that were used as part of the U.S. nuclear program to win the Cold War. And we look after particularly the corrective actions that were done to make sure that the environment can be reused or can be protected. Today, we are responsible for 92 sites around the country. In 20 years, we'll probably be responsible for 120 sites around the country. The Cold War had an intricate need or an intricate use of natural resources. Winning that war left us a legacy. That legacy had a cost as far as human toll and the exchange and effort and sweat and tears for our nuclear workers, as well as how we went about extracting the minerals and the materials that helped us win that. That legacy requires attention. We are committed as a country to not only fulfill those actions, protect the environment, but also make sure that they're maintained.
Video of tractor lifting material.
It is very important for us to look after the human legacy of those actions. Inform people what took place, what actions are being taken to protect the environment and people, and also to what can we do to reuse that land and those resources.
Video of elk herd.
LM gives back to communities through beneficial reuse by working with the communities and finding ways where the land and access to that land could be provided back to the greater use of the public.
Photo of people at Information Fair.
So educational, recreational use, light use of facilities and that land help us not only to maintain the remedies, but also educate the public and be able to provide further use for the use of the community.
Video of staff working on Ocean Coast.
The Office of Legacy Management is here to stay. We're not going away. We are going to strive very hard to do our job in protecting human health and the environment, engage in community outreach and public education, and we will strive very hard also to be responsive, relevant, and reliable to stakeholders and community leaders.
Photo of people shaking hands.
This work is important because it is a promise that we have kept to the American public.
U.S. Department of Energy Legacy Management. Visit us on LinkedIn.
It was a Monday, a hot July day, and for some reason, a day that I felt a great foreboding, and I don't know why.
The sky lit up, and it's just like the sun rose. Everything was bright. You can see all the buildings for a second.
Port Chicago came into existence in the aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the realization that the United States was going to be going to war against Japan and had to rev up for that. They needed now a major ammunition facility. And at that time, the practice was to use black sailors for jobs like ammunition loading, unloading ships. Blacks were not really welcomed into combat.
These were men who thought that they were being trained to go off and fight a war. However, they were very proud that they were able to support the war.
The Jim Crow laws were laws that basically separated the races in the South. The entire society was racially divided between blacks and whites. Port Chicago was exactly like that. The barracks for the black sailors were segregated. The work was segregated. One group would load for 8 hours and then it'd be replaced by another group. And they worked around the clock, The officers came up with this idea of encouraging competition between the work groups to get higher output. Which, if you stop even for just a second and think about that, that's an insane idea.
They would actually bet one another and compete from one shift to another, which was not a safe thing to do.
July 17, 1944 began as a day like any other at the base. As the ships were being loaded late in the evening, something went wrong. A first smaller explosion that seemed to occur on the ship itself, and then the big one as all the bombs in the ship went off like one big bomb.
There were 320 men who died in that explosion. There were about 400 who were injured.
And it was the worst home front disaster during all of World War II. The next day, when you look at photographs, you realize that the pier was gone. The Quinault Victory, which had just arrived, they could see the stern of the ship turned over. What was left was sticking up out of the water.
I had an uncle who served at Port Chicago. He was sitting in a chair next to his bunk. He said he was thrown against the wall, a wall of windows. The windows shattered. He said they worked for 3 days cleaning up. He said he'd find a hand in a glove and a foot in a shoe, and how horrible it was. He said, but they didn't stop. He said they didn't go to sleep. The third day after he finally got a chance to lay down, he discovered he had glass in his back, but he didn't know it all that time.
The bodies which were sufficiently intact to be identified, some of them are in Golden Gate Cemetery. The handful of sailors buried up there are all that were found. It was the survivors of this terrible tragedy who now found themselves without any explanations of what would be done about it to keep it from happening again.
When they were marching one day, they knew that if they went in one direction, they'd be going to ships to load them. They knew if they went in another direction, they wouldn't be.
At that point, their commanding officer gave the order, column left. And everybody stopped.
They didn't move. And it was actually a work stoppage, but it was considered mutiny.
That was the substance of the so-called mutiny.
So some of them went back to work, but there were 50 of them that stood strong. You need to teach us what to do and how to do it. This is going to blow up again.
Was there any violence? Were there any threats against the officers? No. Were the officers at any time in danger? No. Did the men have weapons? No. In other words, when we think of mutiny, and when we think of the violent overthrow of the officers of a ship or of a base, and the takeover of that ship or that base by these angry sailors, that is not what happened at Port Chicago.
Well, there was a mutiny trial, the largest mutiny trial in the United States, and they were found guilty. They were convicted of mutiny.
The court consisted of senior naval officers who were the judge and the jury.
Thurgood Marshall was a lawyer for the NAACP at the time. He represented civil rights issues and was a hero for the whole African American community.
Marshall came out and went to the trial for several days, and he basically said this trial is a sham. This is about railroading these sailors and making them responsible for what happened at that base. One of the sailors was pardoned by Bill Clinton, but a pardon is not what we're looking for. A pardon says, you did something wrong, but we're going to forgive you for it.
We would like to have an exoneration of the men so that they know that, that wherever they are, that they're okay and that their names will be cleared.
These sailors paid a very high price for an act of resistance, which itself was totally nonviolent. And that became, I think, an inspiration for the civil rights movement, too. There's a little monument out there now that the National Park Service put up, in which the names of all the men who died are listed. And for the moment, that's what we have to be satisfied with.
So our job is for people to know about the story, try to correct some of the misstatements and misperceptions about the story, and to honor the men who died there and who served there. The story will not be forgotten.
scammers pose as big-name companies. They call or send pop-up messages to scare you about the security of your computer.
We've gotten warnings of viruses in your area. Your computer has been affected. First, download this software so I can delete the dangerous programs.
They're good at pretending to be someone they're not because they want something that isn't theirs, your money. No matter what they say, they haven't found anything wrong with your machine. They just want you to pay for software or tech support services you don't need. If someone pressures you, slow down and think it through. Don't give out your financial information, and don't let anyone take control of your computer. Report imposter scams to ftc.gov/imposters.
It's who we love. And at a time when we have never seemed more divided, a common enemy is killing our loved ones. It doesn't care about our differences or disagreements, about red states, blue states, black lives, or white privilege. It's a threat to each and every child. It is addiction. But if we commit the time, the talent, and the money, we can protect our kids. Prevention worked for measles, malaria, and polio. Prevention worked to shrink our smoking habit. Prevention works. Life can be painful for our kids, especially in these times, but we can teach them resilience and how to make healthy choices. When we act early, we can prevent addiction. Support prevention efforts in your school and community. Start the conversation. Talking to your kids about drugs isn't easy, but we can help.
NOAA's work spans from the bottom of the sea to the surface of the sun. Each day, our employees take the pulse of the changing world around us and share that knowledge with others to ensure public safety, protect and restore marine resources, and strengthen our economy. Our people are as diverse as our mission. We are scientists, engineers, researchers, technicians, and more who live the mission every day. We are also the staff who support the mission behind the scenes.
What I love about my job is that every day we get to see things that nobody has seen before, or in ways that nobody has seen it before.
NOAA's roots reach back more than 200 years. These agencies helped build the foundation of today's NOAA.
You know, we constantly find new and creative, innovative ways to get our message of life-saving information to the public.
Science is the foundation for all we do. As we conduct world-class research and use cutting-edge technology to explore our seas, forecast our weather, understand our climate, protect our coasts, manage our fisheries, and chart our waterways.
It's the intangibles that matter more than anything else. It's not the paycheck, it's not the steady employment, it really is the science. You have a chance to be part of something bigger than just a commercial organization, and that's what NOAA's about.
Our work touches the lives of every American and powers the economy as we work in collaboration with our partners to transform our data and research into real-world applications that inform critical decision-making and protect the people, systems, and services essential to our nation.
And liftoff. I love the mission, I love the work that we do, the people that are involved in this organization.
We are united in our common mission: science, service, stewardship.
Can I have a smartphone? That's all she wanted. Even more than a driver's license. Well, until she got a license. Then it was, Mom, and can I borrow your car? I was very clear. No cell phone use while driving. No texting, no selfies. Phone had to be locked in the glove box. Even her friends complained about not being able to get a hold of her. How could I be so stupid? I put the one thing in her hand that she couldn't control. Painkillers. There is nothing in the world that would take this pain away. Ever.
I am 6 years old and I'm in first grade. I like going to school, but some days I have to miss school. Sometimes my asthma is bad or I just need to rest. My mom always tries her best, but sometimes I have to miss school because things don't always go as planned. If I miss too many days of school, I probably won't be able to read, write, or do math like my friends. When I miss school for any reason, even if it's excused, it can be hard for me to catch up to my friends. And when I try to make up work at home, it's not the same as learning from my teachers and friends in class. If I keep missing school days, I might fail a grade, or even worse, I might not graduate. I'm only in elementary school now, but when I get bigger, I will go to high school. And the less I'm absent now, the better I'll do in school later. Mommy has big dreams for me, and so do I. When I'm in school every day, I can stay on track, keep up with my friends, and I'll be ready for 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade, and more. My mommy can help make sure I don't miss too many days now, so I can make her proud and do well in school. I know sometimes it's not easy, but my mom is doing her best to help me succeed.